All right, I'll get out of Brendan's way while he connects here. So I'll introduce Brendan while he's hooking up his video. But Brendan Collins, co-founder and principal of MakePath. A little story on NSGIC Magic. I connected with Brendan through NSGIC, and then in conversations come to find out that his sister is working as a researcher in State University of New York, and she was had a really novel approach to measuring COVID in wastewater, and worked with us to understand the sewer sheds for the samples. And just one of those wonderful stories about connecting with wicked smart people. So really happy to have you, Brendan, and talking about strong teams and open source GIS. All right, thank you.
Wow, so happy to be here. Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Chris Crosby, for a really interesting presentation on open topography. I really enjoyed that. Also, thanks to NSGIC and all the attendees, everyone here and everyone virtual. It's really exciting for MakePath to be here. This is our first conference in a long time, and so it's really nice to see everybody. My name is Brendan Collins. I'm an open source GIS developer. Specifically focused on the Python space for open data science tools. If you've used Python and for Geo, you may have used some of the tools that we've created at MakePath, including X-ray spatial for raster processing, and also data shader for rasterization, bokeh, and we also have a new project that I wanted to announce today. But I'm also the co-founder and principal at MakePath, which is a spatial data science firm based in Austin, Texas. We are also joined by Pablo Fuentes, who's my co-founder, who's sitting back there. And as I go through some of the content today, which is talking about organizational health and building strong teams, and also some details about some open source projects that I'm passionate about, I'd encourage you guys to come and approach us. We're really excited to meet everybody, and if you are virtual, please reach out to us via email or via GitHub, and would love to also connect with everyone that's attending the conference virtually. Pablo and I were united by open tools, and we saw the opportunity to take tools from the open source to help solve client problems. There's so many different tools out there that are open and transparent for folks to use. They do cross many disciplines. And we saw an opportunity to help organizations leverage those tools, whether they be in the geo domain or not. We also have a strong focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is an exciting area for technology and an exciting area to apply specifically to geo problems. And we take these tools and we help clients use them to solve their needs. And here's a couple of our clients. I'll talk a little bit about some of the projects here just before we dive into some talking about teams. This is an interface from NCAP-X, which is helping to communicate insights about how carbon offsets are impacting the landscape. Buyers come and they offset their carbon usage by buying credits. And so we built a tool to help analyze the amount of carbon that was saved through carbon offsets here with NCAP-X. We also work in retail, communicating insights from companies like SafeGraph on foot traffic. So understanding how we can get information out of data. And this is a dashboard that's looking at specific census block groups and a head-to-head comparison of different brands for a specific metro area. We're also involved right now in building foundational tools for the Microsoft Planetary Computer, where we're combining curated data sets like Landsat and Sentinel with scalable compute on Microsoft Azure and open source tools that you can run via Jupyter Hub. So I'd encourage you guys to take a look at that, and that's being used in a variety of applications from land use and deforestation risk analysis to ecosystem monitoring and conservation planning and AI accelerated land cover mapping. And while I love talking about the highly technical stuff, I think it's also important that we talk about organizational health and specifically some team dynamics. And that's the focus of the presentation. And beyond a data science firm, MakePath is a collection of diverse individuals focused on open data science. We draw from open source communities, and all of the members of the Make Path team participate in open source in some capacity. That could be from evangelizing open source to actually making contributions to starting their own projects. And we encourage all team members to get involved no matter what their role is. There was a really interesting article that came out in New York Times Magazine in 2016, which was called "What Google Learned from Its Quest to Build the Perfect Team." To boil this down for the group a little bit, one of the central takeaways from that article was that the right norms can raise the collective intelligence of the group. There was an overall refocus of, instead of who, the background and the aspects of the individual, to the how, of how the team works together and those processes and those dynamics within the team. Psychological safety was named as the most important norm in terms of building the perfect team. I wanted to unpack this concept a little bit and talk about this in the context of both our internal teams at MakePath, but also how we interface with the rest of the world. So psychological safety is basically the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up. And this is how we organize our teams, so that we make sure that we find small problems before they turn into big problems, that we encourage everyone to express new ideas, no matter how off the wall those ideas may be, and generally encourage collaboration between team members, and also encourage that people are able to admit their mistakes so that they can be learned from and corrected. So how can you build psychological safety on your team? How can you make it so that folks feel safe to speak up, whether it be about new ideas or problems or faults that they may have? And these are a couple of things that we do to help build psychological safety within MakePath, but then also within the open source communities that we promote. One of the first things is to set explicit priorities. So that means that the priorities of the individuals, that people have clear roles and understand what their role is within the team. But then we also value both synchronous and asynchronous communication empowered by modern tooling. So we do things, for instance, like daily stand-ups, where we'll take 15 minutes and we'll have everybody from our team each day state their priorities and any of the blockers that they have, and maybe some of the other items that we may not have thought of for the week, that how the week has changed. We do weekly syncs where we get everyone together and we chat at a high level about the priorities for the week. We also have project-specific meetings. I'm going to talk a little bit about those. And we also do one-on-one mentorship, where we pair individual team members together and allow them to basically share what they're doing and also get feedback on how things are going. So this is what it looks like during COVID, is our Zoom calls. And we all talk and we go through each team member each day to find out what's going on. And I loved this. When I was an engineer and less focused on leading a team, I loved the ability to tell everyone what I was doing and then not be bothered. So there is a part of this is having clear communication at the beginning of the day, so that folks can go and focus on their work and really experience kind of that deep work without interruption. Here's a view of Slack, which many folks may know. There's many other tools you can do asynchronous communication, but this is for the items that happen during the day that may not need to have everyone together, or it might be something that somebody can post and folks can come back to later. And now there's a really nice synergy between synchronous and asynchronous, where you can go into a chat and maybe be chatting about something. But if you are familiar with the huddle feature from Slack, you can go directly into synchronous communication when it's warranted. Also, setting priorities is also about focus. So we have here, this is a project board for X-ray spatial, one of the raster libraries that we work on. And I think the interesting thing about this screenshot, I know there's a lot of noise here, is that there is only one item on in progress. So one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to limit in-flight tasks do each task to its completion, and then move on to the next task. What we don't want to have is too many in-flight tasks with too much chaos. We also want to facilitate everyone speaking up. We start doing that by establishing a code of conduct. And that code of conduct serves to align the team on common norms and also serve as a place that people can point to if someone feels that there's been a transgression through the team. And we use these codes of conduct both internally and externally. I love check-in and check-out. And I think the focus here should be check-out. So this idea of check-in, check-out is the idea that everybody speaks at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. Many times meetings end and folks go to do their work, but maybe there was something that was unclear, and forcing folks to speak up at the end of the meeting can help clarify some of that. So I'd encourage everyone to do checkouts in addition to just check-ins. We also embrace productive conflict. I think that many times there can be too much consensus in meetings. Consensus can sometimes conceal. It's so easy to agree with other people and nod your head and then go back to your desk and basically disagree in silence. And so I like to reward constructive dissent. I like it when people speak up about something or doubt something that's going on so that we can get to the bottom of that. And then we also agree to disagree, but commit. So we want ownership from the team, and if there is disagreement, that's fine, and we can review things in the future. But we want that ownership, and we want people to commit to a common goal. Ultimately, we also really want to create a space for new ideas. And when you have strong psychological safety, you can get a lot of ideas. There can be a flood of so many ideas that sometimes it can be hard to capture all of them. So we use tools like GitHub issues to capture all the ideas that come out, even if they're bad, and we can prioritize them later, and we can go through and we can do that, prioritization and move items into an in progress state if it's appropriate. Some of the heuristics that I use for ideas, and this comes from the Zen of Python, if anyone's familiar with this. So if the implementation of the idea is hard to explain, it's a bad idea. I go with that. If someone's rambling on for a really long time about a specific code feature, it may be too complicated and it might need more thought. If the implementation is easy to explain, it may be a good idea. It doesn't mean it's a good idea, but it could be if it's simple to explain. And then with all the flood of ideas coming in, we have to realize that doing it now is better than never. Although never is often better than right now. So sometimes when we prioritize things, new ideas come in and they can add confusion. And so I'm very fine with ideas coming in and never executing on them. That's okay. We can put in issues, we can prioritize them, and we can move on, and some things never get addressed, but we continually prioritize. So open source does this to the extreme, where we're involving distributed teams with high collaboration and high peer review. So we use the open source model as our internal model. We do things like pull requests, and we use GitHub to collaborate on code. And ultimately what MakePath is doing is we're connecting disciplines and we're connecting individuals. So we're taking tools and concepts from one area and we're applying them to Geo. And so participating in open source communities and modeling our internal processes based on open source keeps everyone synced. One of those communities that I'd like to promote is the PanGeo community. So every week we meet with PanGeo, and this is a consortium of folks that are interested in climate science. So this is bringing together folks from Google, from Columbia University, from private industry. We meet every week. We follow these same principles of building a strong team, and we align ourselves to make sure that we learn from each other and that we focus on building open science tools. Also, the Bokeh project, which we're working heavily on to create publication quality outputs for researchers. This is an interactive plotting tool that allows you to build rich applications in the browser. Ultimately, open source is one of the main ways that we boost morale at the company. Right now, our employees express wanting to make an impact in the world and wanting to have the visibility of their work for other folks. And open source is a great way to do that. And so I think everyone adopting an open source project to contribute to can have a major impact on morale. I wanted to tell a little story about how open source innovates, and a little bit about how we find synergy from cross discipline connections. One of my favorite libraries is a library called NumPy. Now, NumPy came out of the Mayo Clinic. It was developed by Travis Oliphant. So this is a biomedical imagery library, but it provided a fundamental data structure for the Python community. So it started with biomedical imaging. And we can see a couple of code samples here. Now, this is very, very numeric. It's focused on integers and floats. It's not particularly user-friendly for say, business analysts. And a group of folks on Wall Street from the finance domain came along and said, hey, that's for biomedical imaging, but we can make something akin to an Excel worksheet if we were to wrap these NumPy arrays up and create a new tool called pandas. And what you'll find from cross disciplines is that certain disciplines are better at things than other disciplines. If there's any discipline you want managing date time information, it's finance people. Finance people really care about date times. And date times are actually harder than you may think. Now, you may know that an edge case in date times that every 4 years we add an extra day. And that's an edge case. You got to think about that. I mean, if you're thinking what's the day of the week, maybe 5 years from now, you best take into account the leap year. But did you know that every 100 years we skip a leap year, and every 400 years we don't skip a leap year? So date times are very difficult, and you want finance people handling date times. So we get the finance folks, they come, they wrap up a piece of software from biomedical imaging, and then someone else comes along and says, hey, we could add a geometry column to that thing that those finance people are doing. And then we have a representation of a shapefile that's using the same tools, but now applies to the geo domain. And that's where Joris and other folks from the GeoPandas community have really supported GIS, and we can see some of this cross-discipline synergy. Other folks that knew a lot about parallel computing and distributed computing came along and said, hey, we can take that finance business thing and we can spread it over thousands of machines. And we can do parallel computing on problems that are larger than the size of just one machine or the memory that we have on our laptops. And that's where DAS came along. So DAS provided all this concurrency and parallelism from a separate kind of computer science discipline. And now we have Dask GeoPandas. So then yours comes back, another person comes and says, hey, we can take what Dask did, but we can apply it to Geo now, and we can address problems in the GIS space that are larger than a single machine. And so that's where we get Dask GeoPandas. And that's where I also wanted to announce a library that MakePath open sourced last week, which is called Census Parquet, which is for processing Census 2020 boundary files. So you may be familiar with Census 2020 coming out, and we released a library and processing scripts that will allow you to convert those files into the Parquet format so that you can scale them across multiple machines and deal with a lot of those issues that come with fast I/O and data structures. And so strong teams are the foundation of critical connections, and that's the theme of this year's annual conference. Psychological safety is the foundation of strong teams and healthy communities. I talked a little bit about that. If you'd like to learn more about MakePath, I'd encourage you to go to our blog. That's makepath.com/blog. You can see some of the projects that we're involved in and communities we're passionate about. We are also hiring. We focus on open source tools. And I know that I threw a lot of information at you guys. So please feel open, to come to myself and Pablo Fuentes, who's sitting in the back there, and connect with us. And if you have any questions about these tools, but I would like to open it up to the floor for anyone in person or virtual.
So Brendan, real quick, how do you handle when you're trying to build a team and you've got a group who you're not sure if they're being honest with you on what it is they're trying to do? For example, you've got a team and everybody's saying we should implement this, but that other part of the team is going, no. And then they talk about how hard it really is. But then you're questioning, is it really that hard or they just don't want to do it? You know, how do you handle differences and that kind of thing? You overrule them by vote, or how does that work?
Yeah, ultimately a decision needs to be made. We don't rely on voting. We tend to have someone make a decision, but then have everyone commit to that decision. Having clear success metrics is really important. With some team members, a management dial is needed. You need to turn up the management dial and have more communication and really understand. And sometimes, you know, we do not allow toxic communication, and sometimes that includes having to point to a code of conduct. But in general, I think that clear communication and often communication and setting clear priorities, limiting in-flight tasks can really add clarity. But you know, these are difficult problems, and we're all human, so you know, we all struggle with that.
Thank you.
Hi, Leland Pierce, New Mexico. And I'm bringing this up because my actual background is up on wildlife, but also climate change. I've been doing it for, you know, two almost 3 decades now. I'm always blown away about the work that's going on in open science. It's amazing. The previous talk, we had the examples of the sand dunes moving. That's actually an issue that's going on in wildlife in southeastern New Mexico. The federal government's interested in this. We're trying to get them the data. I would be interested in your thoughts on how can we as government officials at the state make, say, the federal government know what's going on in everything in open science? Because when it comes to climate change, you guys are just mind-blowing the stuff that you do, but trying to make them aware in a time frame where they could use it so it's part of the best available science is a challenge. So you were talking a lot about communication. How can we help you communicate what you're doing and what you know, there's overall issues that need to be addressed that I think the open science community could really help on. How do we work together to improve communication so that, you know, all these different agencies are aware of what the open group is doing and what we're doing, and just, I think we can do a lot together.
Yeah, thanks. I think ultimately people care about outcomes and not tools. We care about use cases and not trying to push a specific technology. And when you can show an outcome that's compelling, and then folks will ask, how did you do that? Or how can I reproduce that? Then come up the tools, and then you can say, hey, you can easily reproduce this because it's open, and you start seeing that value. I also think just attending a lot of the open source meetings. So for instance, with Pangeo and Bokeh, anybody can join those weekly status meetings, and you can get more connected into, you know, the groups that most apply to what you're doing. Thank you guys. Thanks everyone.